You probably think you're smarter than a caveman. Everyone does. We've got phones, satellites, medicine that can rewrite your DNA. Compared to a guy hitting rocks together 20,000 years ago, it's not even a contest. Except here's the part nobody tells you. If you took that same caveman, cleaned him up, put him in a hoodie, sat him down next to you, his brain would physically be bigger than yours. Not a little bigger, about 10% bigger. And the honest, uncomfortable question scientists have been quietly arguing about for over a decade is this. What if bigger wasn't just bigger? What if, in some very real ways, it was better? This is the story of the shrinking human brain, the skull that proved it, and the reasons, some of them genuinely unsettling, that might explain where all that lost capacity actually went. In 1868, in a cave in southern France, workers digging a road cut into a rock shelter and found 5 skeletons. One of them, an older man, became known as Cro-Magnon one of the most famous early modern humans ever discovered. For over a century, he was just bones in a museum case. Then, in 2010, scientists finally scanned the inside of his skull and built a full 3D replica of the brain that used to fill it. And the number that came back was strange. His brain wasn't just old. It was around 15 to 20% larger than the average brain sitting inside your head right now. This wasn't a one-off. Once researchers started measuring skulls systematically across Europe, Africa, and Asia, the same pattern kept showing up everywhere there was data. Here's the actual scale of it. Look at European skulls specifically. Roughly 10,000 years ago, the average brain volume in women was about 1,502 milliliters. Today, that number is around 1,241. That's a drop of over 250 milliliters. Gone. In a span of time that, on an evolutionary clock, barely counts as an afternoon. To put that rate in perspective, the long climb in brain size that took our ancestors nearly 1 million years to build happened roughly 36 times slower than the recent shrinkage. Something sped this process up, and it sped it up hard. And this isn't fringe science. It's been documented since the late 1980s, confirmed across multiple continents, in multiple populations, using multiple methods. The debate was never really about whether it happened. It was about why. Now, before this goes anywhere misleading, brain size alone does not equal intelligence. Elephants have bigger brains than we do. Sperm whales have brains nearly 6 times the size of ours. Nobody's arguing a whale could win a chess match. Some scientists have proposed that our brains got smaller because they got more efficient, trimming a costly organ down to a leaner, better wired version of itself. It's a comforting theory. It might even be partly true. But when researchers actually compared regions instead of just total volume, they found something odd. It wasn't an even trim. The cerebellum, the part of the brain tied to motor control and increasingly to language processing, appears to have been smaller in Cro-Magnon skulls than in ours. But other regions associated with different kinds of reasoning were larger, not a simple "we improved," a trade. And nobody has fully mapped what we gave up to get what we have now. So what caused 250,000 years of brain growth to suddenly reverse, right around 10,000 years ago? The timing is the giveaway. That's almost exactly when a huge portion of the human species did something it had never done before. It stopped hunting and gathering and started farming. Farming looks like progress. Steady food, bigger populations, permanent settlements. But the actual nutrition got worse, not better. A hunter-gatherer's diet pulled from dozens of wild plants and animals, a rotating, redundant safety net of nutrients. Early farmers, by contrast, leaned hard on 1 or 2 grain crops. Calorie-rich, nutrient-poor. Add in crowding, new infectious diseases jumping between humans and the animals they'd just domesticated, and a body under chronic strain. And you have exactly the kind of pressure that could quietly shrink a demanding, expensive organ like the brain over generations. There's a blunt way to put this. The agricultural revolution, the thing history textbooks frame as one of humanity's greatest leaps forward, may have been the same event that started cutting our brains down to size. Here's where it gets stranger and more contested. In the 1880s, the scientist Francis Galton ran simple reaction time tests on thousands of Victorian-era Britons. How fast someone reacts to a flash of light. In 2013, researchers gathered every comparable study done since and lined them up side by side. The Victorians were faster, consistently, measurably faster. by an amount some researchers translated into a gap of over 13 IQ points in raw processing speed. I want to be straight with you. This finding is genuinely disputed. Other scientists argue it's an artifact of old equipment and sloppy 19th century methodology, not a real decline. Nobody has fully closed that argument, but if even part of it holds up, it lines up disturbingly well with the same shrinking timeline. So if it's not really about raw horsepower, where does the gap show up? Increasingly, researchers think it's not that our brains got worse at thinking, it's that we quietly started outsourcing the thinking itself. There's a well-documented effect now nicknamed the Google effect. In a 2011 study, people were far less likely to remember a piece of information if they believed they could simply look it up later. Their brains didn't store the fact. They stored the location of the fact. Multiply that across a lifetime, across an entire species that now carries a search engine in its pocket, and you get a mind that's optimized for finding answers instead of holding them. An ancient human couldn't do that. Every plant that could kill you, every animal's migration pattern, every star that marked the changing seasons, all of it had to live inside a single skull because there was nowhere else to put it. Maybe that's not a smaller kind of intelligence. Maybe it's just a kind we've forgotten we ever needed. So go back to that skull in the French cave. For over 100 years, it sat in a case as a curiosity, proof of how far we'd come. Now it sits as something closer to a question mark. We didn't get smarter by accident. We got faster at finding answers, and slower, maybe, at actually holding them. Somewhere between the first wheat field and the phone in your pocket, we traded something. Nobody's entirely sure yet what it was worth. Next time you assume you'd outsmart a caveman, remember, he wouldn't have needed to Google the answer.